in the arrest made in the killing of Jazmine Barnes.
Yeah, lots of developments overnight. We know that the sheriff at about 11 o'clock last night said that this case had taken a turn, and about 1 o'clock in the morning they did formally say in charge someone with capital murder. He's 20-year-old Eric Black Jr. And sources are telling us that there is a second person who is already in custody and will also likely be charged in connection to this case. But so far that has not happened. That second person is Larry Woodruff, age 24.
And according to court documents, both of those men appearing in court overnight, and according to documents from interviews that were done with police, these men said they saw the car that Jazmine and her family were riding in and believed it to be the car of someone else that they were apparently looking for, and that's why they fired on the car. Investigators saying this shooting was in fact random, and they do not believe Jazmine's family was targeted.
At this point, they say it does appear to be random. It was a case of mistaken identity. Investigators saying in some of the PC documents that we saw earlier that these individuals that are said to be involved in this case had seen a car similar to that which turned out to be Porsche's, shot indiscriminately. Unfortunately, that right there was a victim that paid the ultimate price for this. 7-year-old Jazmine Barnes, along with her mother Portia, who was also shot and still recovering from her injuries as well. Needless to say, that family is shaken to the core as a result of what happened. But we do know some 6 days to 7 days after this incident happened out of the east part of town that at least one arrest and formal charges come, with more likely to come in the next couple of hours, if not days. And
news of this arrest coming, of course, Jonathan, just a few days before Jazmine is set to be laid to rest. We did hear from the Barnes family attorney, Lee Merritt. He spoke to our reporter, Brittany Jeffers, just moments ago, saying that the arrest did come. News of the arrest coming as a relief to the family as they prepare to say their final goodbyes to this beautiful little girl taken from them too soon. But of course, they say they were shocked as well that the suspects ended up being these two men, as opposed to what was widely depicted in that sketch, a white male in a red truck. And of course, there was a red truck in the area. We saw surveillance video. So it's just a question now of, did the girls look up and see that red truck? That's all they saw? And how that happened. And
that's something we're still waiting to hear. I've heard some speculation out there that perhaps that individual may have been a witness as well, who perhaps was fleeing. If you hear gunshots, as to be expected, you may take off as well. But we know over the course of the last couple of days, this case has kind of gone a little bit all over the place. But we do know that a lot of leads started coming in once those sketches, or the suspect sketch, was released along with that vehicle. And as a result of that, we know that the community outpouring of support, not just here locally, but nationally, has come in for this family in an effort to help catch those killers or killer responsible for the death of Jazmine. And in the end, it was a tip that was given to the Harris County Sheriff's Office that led them to these two suspects. We have again Eric Black Jr., age 20, charged with capital murder. Investigators say they did a search of his home and they found a 9mm pistol that matched ballistics that they found at the scene when they did a search of his home, and that's how they're tying him to this case. Again, still waiting on possible charges against Larry Woodruff. Both of these men arrested overnight in separate traffic stops. Drugs were found in both of their cars, Xanax in one and marijuana in the other. So we're trying to, again, see how all this is linked. But again, two people in custody, one formally charged with capital murder in the death of 7-year-old Jazmine Barnes. And interesting to note here, the first person who was formally charged, Eric Black, the 20-year-old, during the course of appearing before a judge, prosecutors did say that he had admitted to taking part in the crime. However, he was not the one, at least according to him and what prosecutors are saying, he was not the one that pulled the trigger. He's claiming that he was the driver and that was his involvement. He pointed the finger at somebody listed as LW in PC documents. And again, sources are telling us that LW in this case is Larry Woodruff. He's claiming that he's the one who ultimately pulled the trigger in this incident. We want to go now to our reporter, Sally Mamdou, who is live at the Harris County Sheriff's Office as we await the beginning of this news conference. Sally?
And Sion, the arrest of these suspects isn't going to fill the void of losing a child. However, it will help the family focus on the upcoming funeral arrangements, upcoming funeral for Jazmine this Tuesday. Now, Jazmine Barnes' family just spoke a few moments ago addressing the media following the arrest. Jazmine's father and Lee Merritt, an attorney advising the Barnes family, spoke to the media on what it feels like to finally have the people believed to be responsible in custody, as well as addressing the media on the confusion that came from the original description of the suspect released, which was a white male. Take a listen.
Yes, ma'am. I feel some relief in this because now my baby has got justice, and now we can properly put her to rest without having to put her to rest and be still on a manhunt looking for suspects, whatever it may be.
The fact is, a white man in a red truck pulled up next to this car moments before the shooting. Onlookers, not only the individuals in the car, but others nearby, motorists, independent witnesses, they heard loud shots. They looked up and they saw a red car with a white man taking off full speed, and they made the poor assumption that it was that red truck that was firing upon the vehicle. We appreciate them coming forward with even those facts. Eventually, we were able to arrive to the truth, and that ultimately is what we wanted to do.
And as we mentioned to you earlier, 2 people are now in custody in connection with Jazmine's death. Eric Black Jr., who prosecutors say the driver, and Larry Woodruff, who they say was the alleged shooter. We are live in downtown. Sally Mebdu, KPRC, Channel 2 News.
All right, Sally, thanks a lot for that update. And we do want to get to some video of those 2 individuals in court. This happened overnight. Eric Black, formerly charged with capital murder, he went before a judge, as did Larry Woodruff, on separate charges. This right here is when some of the allegations against them came out. We should also note that at this point, Eric Black is being held without bond, meaning at this point he will remain behind bars until his appearance in court. As for Larry Woodruff, right now, we do know that his bond is set at about $100,000, but that, of course, isn't in relation to the current charges that could potentially come in connection to the Jazmine Barnes case. And
we are looking forward to hearing from Sheriff Ed Gonzalez to provide even more detail than what we've learned in the overnight hours about exactly what was going on here, why these men were shooting into anyone's car, and unfortunately why this had to lead to the death of little 7-year-old Jazmine Barnes. And sadly, as we talk about it, the funeral is going to be coming up on Tuesday. The family can take some comfort in knowing that at least one person, if not 2, potentially more, are going to be behind bars. But unfortunately, the family is going to have to relive this because now the legal process is going to have to play out. There's going to be court dates, separate court dates, oftentimes, unless a plea agreement is reached beforehand. If a conviction comes, you have victim impact statements. So unfortunately, this family is going to have to relive what has ultimately become their worst nightmare in seeing the individuals that are accused of taking part in this case in the death of Jazmine. We want to go now to our Robert Arnold. He is joining us live from the newsroom, one of our Channel 2 investigators who's been digging on this case. What have you learned?
Well, one of the things that we're really waiting to hear from the sheriff's office is exactly how this case turned for them. As you had mentioned, from the get-go almost, we had heard about a possible suspect being a white man, even heard blue eyes in that sketch that went out. That had gone out nationally because you had civil rights activist Shaun King get involved in this, and he put it out there. So from the get-go, we had heard so much going out about a potential white man. So what we're hoping to hear from the sheriff's office is exactly how that changed for them, because they've got a flood of tips, hundreds if not thousands of tips that poured in, especially after that sketch was released. So we're hoping to get some more clear indication as to what led investigators to the 2 men who have been arrested in this case. As you had heard, there has been a tremendous amount of speculation that that red pickup truck was seen leaving the area quickly, which would be expected when you hear gunshots. Anybody in the area is going to try and get out of there as quickly as possible. And that shows you just how difficult a job police have when you have these incredibly chaotic scenes that are on a public street. You have people running in all different directions, and it gets very difficult for police at times to sort out, what eyewitnesses have seen, what eyewitnesses in their heart of hearts believe they have seen, and what the actual facts are. And that's what we're hoping that Sheriff Gonzalez is going to help enlighten us on at this point. Not much is known about Black at this point. However, Woodruff, we have been looking at him. He does have a lengthy criminal record. Back to you, Jonathan Sion.
All right, thanks a lot for that, Robert. Again, we are awaiting a press conference by the sheriff of Harris County. It's going to be Ed Gonzalez. He has been up all night. As we mentioned, this story really developing overnight, late in the evening when we were told that by a tweet from the sheriff that this case had taken a turn. And just when you thought that perhaps it was done for the night and we would find out more in the morning, less than about 2 hours later, we formally hear that charges of capital murder have been filed in one person or against one person so far. So it's been a busy day for the sheriff along with the entire law enforcement agency, and it's been a busy week really for them as they've been scouring the area, even setting up a checkpoint not too far away from where this incident happened. So at this point, though, the community, along with investigators and the family, more importantly, breathing a bit of a sigh of relief knowing that headway has been made in this case, albeit some 7 days after this incident happened. And
of course, we've been showing you images of Jazmine throughout, and that is what really touched people and what really affected people nationwide. We had celebrities from Gabrielle Union speaking out about this. We had our local celebrities, DeAndre Hopkins donating his check from yesterday's game to the family and saying, that could have been my daughter. Everyone can identify with a sweet, innocent little girl, in this unjust taking of her life and the desire to find out who did it, regardless of how complicated the details may get. The fact is, she should not have died at all, and definitely not in this way. And as we look at her and remember what this is truly about, finding justice for Jazmine. And as we are speaking of Jazmine and her family, we understand right now we are waiting that press conference from the sheriff, and as we understand, the family has walked into that viewing area, if you will, of the press conference area. So we are waiting at any moment now. The sheriff will likely be taking the podium. He may be flanked on the side there by the family. They may also speak during this press conference, but at least right now, this is going to be when the sheriff formally tells us what it is that they know beyond what we already know, according to PC documents and what we saw overnight at PC court. And again, a live look for a look at the mugshots of the two men who have been arrested in connection with this case. We have 20-year-old Eric Black Jr., who has been formally charged with capital murder. We also have Larry Woodruff, who is 24 years old. He has not yet been charged in connection with this case. He was arrested on a separate charge, but he has also been taken into custody, was also in court overnight because he has been named as being a part of this case by Eric Black Jr. And of course, there may be other people to come. Exactly. It goes without saying, there could be more than these two individuals right here. It could be as many as 3. It could be more. But again, this case is fluid as it's taken turns throughout the week. There may be even more arrests to come as it pertains to the death of little Jazmine Barnes. This is, again, 2:12 in the afternoon. This presser is supposed to be getting underway at any moment now as, we've been pressing for information, all week long. And then as things ramped up last night, getting in tips from sources, we were trying to get things. But, the sheriff's office operates on their own timetable, and I make sure they have everything buttoned up before they go public with any new information. In talking about the work that they've done, the mayor issued a statement earlier today thanking the Harris County Sheriff's Office along with law enforcement for their due diligence in helping to identify and make an arrest in the suspect of the Jazmine Barnes' senseless murder, is what he said. It goes on to basically thank not just law enforcement, but also the community. We know that the community, as you mentioned, stepped up at this moment. So at the podium right now, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez. We're going to go ahead and listen in to get some more details and an update.
Is everyone ready? Yes? Good afternoon. I'm Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, and I'm joined here by my friend Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Today, I'm here to provide an update to our community, a status on the investigation of the murder of Jazmine Barnes. Just 1 week ago today, Jazmine, her mother, and her siblings were fired upon as they drove along Beltway 8, the feeder road between Wallaceville and Woodforest in East Harris County. From the very beginning of the investigation, we all have been touched by the death of Jazmine. Immediately, my team, the Harris County Sheriff's Office investigators, and some of our top leadership responded to that scene to make sure we did everything possible to solve this crime involving a precious child. We want to thank our community, our local community, for the outpouring of support and towards Jazmine and her family. I also want to thank key leaders such as Sean King, Attorney Lee Merritt, DeAndre Hopkins, Shaquille O'Neal, and countless others that have helped raise awareness to a national level. I also couldn't be more prouder of the work of the Harris County Sheriff's Office, especially our homicide investigators, our squad, for their tenacity and their steadfast commitment to resolving this crime. Also want to thank the many other partners that have helped us within the Sheriff's Office, including law enforcement and civilian personnel, and the amazing work of the Texas Department of Public Safety, that have stood with us shoulder to shoulder working on this case, and we couldn't have a more valuable and effective partner. Being able to get to this point would not be possible without their help. We've also received the help of countless others here in local law enforcement, including constables such as Precinct 3, as well as HPD, as well as federal partners such as NASA and ATF. So again, I want to thank them very much. Through this process, we have received countless tips from many different sources. On Saturday, January 5th, the Harris County Sheriff's Office homicide investigators formally charged Eric Black Jr. with capital murder in the death of Jazmine Barnes. He became a target in our investigation based on a tip that initially went to journalist and activist Sean King. Mr. King then passed that tip to me personally. I myself became involved, working closely with our homicide team, making sure I was there to assist, either through vetting tips, giving a pat on the back, or just being present and helping them as needed. We were able to begin to corroborate the information that was provided and learn even more. This provided a little bit of a different angle, or a much different angle to what we were initially looking at. So we wanted to make sure that we were very thorough. And so this started to unfold just yesterday. Mr. Black has acknowledged his role in Jazmine's murder, and we've also received information that this involves a second individual as well. We are still trying to verify some information, and this investigation is ongoing. So there's still some work that needs to be done. We have been able, again, to verify some information, and so there's still some work to be done. I want to speak a little bit about some questions that I know have been circulating. One is, well, why the change? We were focused on first a description of an Anglo male, a pickup truck, and then eventually the composite that came up. We do know that there was a red truck involved. We know that they had come to a traffic signal near the Walmart. Both this red truck, the driver, and LaPortia and the family. At some point, as the traffic signal turns, they start going. We now believe that red truck probably entered the freeway and continued on in another direction. We believe now that red truck and the driver is most likely just a witness, either by sight or sound, to what actually transpired. We still want that individual to come forward because perhaps they could now shed some light. And so that is one question. We do not believe in any way that the family, again, we've said from the beginning that they've been involved in anything nefarious or anything. We feel they were truthful. This just went down very quickly when the gunfire erupted. You're talking about small children. They witnessed something very traumatic, and it's very likely that the last thing they did see was that, indeed, that red truck and that driver that was in that truck, and that's what they remembered last. But again, now we've been able to receive additional information to corroborate that it was other individuals involved. It appears to us, based on the information we received, this was likely a case of mistaken identity, where the intended targets were likely someone else, but instead they fired upon LaPortia, Jazmine, and her siblings in this case. I want to say as well that this death of Jazmine has sparked a lot of discussion on many different levels. And I think that it is good that going forward we continue to have positive dialogue on a number of issues. We know that there's important discussion that does need to take place about race, about the real fear and concerns that hate crimes are in an uptick across this country. We also need to talk about gun violence, and I'm very proud to serve on Mayor Sylvester Turner's commission against gun violence. And we've done a lot of work through the course of all of last year under the chairmanship of Haley Carter as well. So I've been very involved in that process as well to see how we could diminish gun violence. We also need to see what's going on in our urban communities as well, where many are gunned down and children are gunned down. There's a number of children that have been shot down in this region over this past year. Some were able to survive their injuries, others were not. And so I think going forward, it's good for us to have those positive dialogues. You know, for those out there committing violence upon anyone that would use guns to commit violence on anyone, put the guns down. Stop. Just stop. We do not need any senseless killings. We don't want any more families to have to suffer like this family is suffering. And so just put the guns down. And I want to say briefly in Spanish, estamos aquí para hablar sobre la investigación que ha pasado sobre la víctima Jazmine Barnes de 7 años. Pasó hace una semana, en este mismo día hace una semana. Hemos podido ponerle cargos de capital murder a Eric, perdón. Eric Black Jr., perdón. Le hemos puesto cargos de capital murder. Sabemos o tenemos información que hay una segunda persona que también está implicado en pero por el momento no tenemos esos detalles. Entonces vamos a seguir investigando. No podemos dar mucha información, pero vamos a estar investigando. Es un resultado un poco diferente porque él es un afroamericano y inicialmente estamos buscando una persona anglosajón, una troca roja. Ahora pensamos de que esa troca sí estaba involucrada, pero no en una manera culpable, sino que iba por la carretera también y es muy posible que solamente es un testigo. Entonces queremos que esa persona se presente para tener...
And you're listening in right now to Sheriff Ed Gonzalez addressing the media there in Spanish to some of the updates and details in the Jazmine Barnes case. He had mentioned, again, 1 week to the day that one formal charge has come of capital murder. It's going to be of Eric Black Jr., second one possibly to come. Let's listen back into the sheriff right now. Again, he's taking questions now.
I'll say that we've talked to a number of people from our perspective, still working on this. I'm not going to mention anyone by name that we have not yet charged. So I need to make sure that we're cautious with that because we want to maintain the integrity of this investigation. We're fairly certain there are 2 individuals involved. Again, I mentioned one of them, Mr. Eric Black Jr., and we believe very strongly there's a second one involved. We just need to be able to verify some information, so it's likely that charges are possible, but we're simply not there at this moment.
But is it fair to say the second individual is African American as well? That doesn't fit the initial suspect?
Yes, it's accurate to say
that. Is that person in custody right now?
Have they been arrested?
Is that person in custody right now?
I'm not gonna mention that because we have not charged anyone else, so I cannot say that at this time.
Is he on drug charges right now?
Eric Black Jr. know the family by any chance? Anyone in the...
To our knowledge, they do not know the family. Again, we continue to hold that this is just most likely a case of mistaken identity. We don't know of any linkages to the family or not. They continue to be innocent in all of this.
Sir, when you say mistaken identity...
Sheriff, have investigators recovered a weapon?
I'll just say that we've recovered evidence to continue to corroborate all the information we've received, so we definitely feel we're in a good place at this time. But our work still continues to be able to continue to verify and develop other information at this time. That's why we're not yet at a position to say that this is completely done.
And if I may, it sounds like it was one critical tip that really changed the course of this investigation. If you had not received that tip, where do you think this investigation would be today?
Well, in hindsight, as you could see, the initial information that we have was obviously not consistent with what the final outcome was. So, we were still searching in a different direction. So this tip obviously was very crucial. And so I want to thank, again, Sean King for his activism and help and raising awareness and the monies that were put forward to be able to generate those calls. And again, I was personally involved with him to make sure that we worked through this, as was my commitment that I said we would not rest until we found justice for Jazmine. And so I want to thank them to helping us generate some leads as well. And also our Crime Stoppers affiliate here locally that we work with on a daily basis for helping generate a lot of calls as well. Like I said earlier, we receive calls from many different sources.
Now, how early case of mistaken identity? Do you know or have the suspect said who the intended target was? Do you know who you believe that would be? And how did the family get caught up in this?
We're still trying to develop who the likely targets were. We don't have that information, and I want to emphasize I'm saying likely because we still need to verify some things. We're just saying most likely just because I know motive has really been a topic of discussion. The information that we have is that that's most likely what we're getting here, and we've been able to corroborate some of that. I'll just leave it at that. The family was just traveling down the roadway, as they mentioned they were. I mean, just that early morning. And also just speaking a little bit about maybe some of the confusion on what happened. It was still dark. At that time, sun didn't start to rise until about 7:16 a.m. that morning. So it was still dark when all this was happening. So there are a lot of different facets that could potentially impact someone's memory of what they saw at that time, at that early morning.
Was there an argument and the suspect went looking for somebody to retaliate against? Or
we're still trying to verify some information, going back to the motive and possible, like what you're mentioning, that it could possibly be a case of mistaken identity. But to that point, with that point now, with this new information, what we do hope is that somebody out there could still give us a call to tighten up some of that information, because I can't quite verify it yet. And so we're still asking for the public to call us at 713-221-6000 or Crime Stoppers at 713-222-TIPS, so we could find out and determine if they can, give us additional information now on Eric Black Jr., some of the associates, some of the other individuals that could possibly be involved.
And about motive. The gunman or the driver? If I could ask a question, you said it was still dark at that time, and I believe there was some fog out there as well. And so that raises the question of how the description of the suspect at that time, as a man in his 30s and 40s, beard, no beard, blue eyes, how that could have been possible given the conditions of darkness.
Yeah, well, a couple things. Remember that I mentioned that there was indeed a red truck at the stoplight, so there is a pause there and an opportunity and time to look at, who's positioned next. Again, these were also young children in the car, and so, it's a combination of things. Again, I'm not going to question it. I think it was sincere information that came forward. There was no nefarious motive to give a different description. Everything went really fast when it started to unfold, and perhaps that's just the last thing that they remember prior to the mayhem and the chaos. And so, again, we sometimes we don't always get the most clear and best information up front for those reasons, and so we want to just say that may have been a possible reason why.
And could I follow up with one thing? In the early days, the term hate crime, that was a suspicion on the part of a lot of people. Is that off the table now?
But yeah, at this point, I would say, again, that we're still, again, I want to just preface it by saying I've tried to be cautious from the beginning on this, and I'll say it again. It appears to be a crime of just a case of mistaken identity, but we're still asking. As I said, there's still an ongoing investigation. So if anybody has any information out there, please call us, especially as now that this new information that's becoming public. And so, again, yeah, we want to know if there's something else that we're missing in this. But at this point, again, it does not appear that it was related to race.
And just to clarify, to tighten up the timeline a little bit, were you guys still working on the red truck theory up until yesterday? Were you looking at other things already, or did this one tip turn everything around?
Yeah, well, again, we received a lot of tips throughout the week. I think over 1,000 different tips, and many, some was a lot of duplication because they kept pointing at certain. Yeah, they kept pointing at some of the same things that were circulating around social media. So we were getting a lot of those calls, and so it was about trying to track that down. We had not really been able to fully move away from the Anglo-male red truck discussion. So as we got that one, it did provide a little bit of a different angle, so it did require even more, just kind of more review, more diligence and thoroughness on our part amongst everything else we were trying to track down. We were out in the field. We were out canvassing, trying to track down video. And so it was just a lot going on.
So
and
like
so this kind of developed.
Did you get that yesterday?
No. We started getting some information, I would say, in the last 2 days on that, maybe approximately.
So like Friday, maybe?
Yeah, maybe around, yeah. And so, but it wasn't anything we could yet corroborate. So little by little we began.
And the initial tips came from Sean King's tipster?
Correct, from that, even though we were getting sourced from all over. I don't remember the exact day. It was middle week. No.
Middle of the week.
Yeah, middle week, but we had some very basic information, and it just didn't quite gel at the time, but it was through the follow-up work that we started to then develop that tip more, and it really came to a head yesterday, and pieces started falling together very rapidly.
And can you talk a little bit, do you know, there was some talk in the PC appearance by this individual about how you found like his Instagram account and that tracing. Can you talk a little bit about how that social media worked into that?
Yeah.
I mean, they talked about it in court.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I'll let the DA's office talk about what they want to release on their side, because we do have the prosecution side of things. And again, this is still an ongoing investigation. So from our standpoint, I don't want to necessarily get into everything. We were using to corroborate and confirm information and verify. But I do just want to say that we continued to develop that lead as this went on, as we pursued others as well. And everything just started to fall into place. And we got the corroboration we needed to feel certain that we're now on the right track.
And there's been of the many things. I just want to clarify. There's one thing that's on Facebook. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of people, as you know, social media talking about this. Today, after all this information came out, there was some talk about perhaps that the mother was Facebook friends with a guy by this name, by the name Eric. Is that like a false thing?
I have not heard any of that.
Okay.
I have not heard any of that.
Sure. Asking more about the suspects. What kind of car were they driving at the time, and do we know who fired the gun and how many shots were fired?
The only thing we have at this point is on Eric Black Jr. That's the only person that we're talking about, because we're still developing additional information. We do believe there is a second one that was involved in this incident. And so at this point, because we're still working on that, there are no formal charges on that person, but there still could be charges filed in this case.
Sheriff, at any point, when and where was this suspect apprehended, and when you spoke to him, did he show any remorse?
He was arrested yesterday afternoon out in East Harris County. All of them are connected out in East Harris County, that the focus of our investigation so far. And so I did not personally interview him and all that, so I can't speak to remorse or anything.
At any point ever convey to you that he expressed remorse?
We didn't talk about that.
Is there any indication that he is in a gang? Is there any way that he was trying to target somebody else that was in a gang?
I personally can't talk about that. If that becomes apparent, or our investigators could give us that information here going forward, we'll mention that. I've heard some of that discussion, but I personally don't have knowledge of gang affiliation.
Sheriff, any message to members of the community who are, you had talked about the relationship with the community and how that played a role in this case, the tips that were brought forward, but any message to people who are skeptical that you've got the right people because they're black and the suspect description was white, people who maybe don't trust the police?
I feel very comfortable with where we're at. We're going to be very thorough and make sure that we're not charging anyone that doesn't have the necessary probable cause and information that we need to corroborate. Again, we were very thorough in making sure we did that and not rush to any conclusions. And we've been able to corroborate information, develop evidence throughout this process to where we feel very comfortable. And again, I personally have been involved in this investigation, assisting my team as needed. They've done all the work, but I've been there to support. I've been personally involved helping vet information and tips and things like that myself. So I feel very comfortable, and I know firsthand how this investigation has kind of unfolded. So I feel very comfortable that we're on point right now.
¿Alguien va a obtener la recompensa en este caso?
Eso es algo que viene por Sean King. Otros. She was asking about the reward. That's something that Sean King was obviously coordinating in terms of the reward that they posted. So.
¿Has hablado con la familia ¿Han dicho algo respecto a estas
Hemos hablado con familiares y están agradecidos. We've spoken to some of the family members, and they're obviously appreciative of where things are right now. And our condolences are with them. And, we continue to send prayers for Jazmine. Sí hemos hablado con los familiares y están muy agradecidos con donde estamos en este proceso en este momento.
Sure, you said that Eric Smith acknowledged his role. Was it as driver, shooter, or both?
Eric Black Jr. has acknowledged his role because there's still a potential for filing a charge as someone else. I'm not going to speak to the specificity, at least I'm not, on what that role was, because we still need to tighten up and verify some things from others, and we're interviewing other people. We have interviewed some others on this case, but we need to verify information. I'm simply not going to state who those names are.
What were some of the initial elements of this case that led to this suspicion that this could possibly be a hate crime? What were those?
Well, again, I think that some time ago there was an incident where that became high profile at that time. It was around the time of Harvey, where a black male had been shot, and it was suspected that the gunman at that incident was an Anglo male. And while it was not exactly there at the Walmart per se, it happened about 6 miles away. Eventually they drove there seeking help and came to a stop there. So just from proximity to the region, and we had done some follow-up work on that particular case after it was brought to our attention of some, the need for more follow-up investigation. We did it at the time. I spoke to the investigator at the start of the week this week, and we continued to look into the case even further. As I said in one of the press conferences, that we would make sure we looked into that to address that concern, but we at that time did not see any linkages to this particular crime.
So, sir, prosecutors said on December 31st that is when the tip came in. Why did it take from then until now for the update on the suspects to be?
I didn't enter that charge information. I don't remember it being on the 31st. And again, it could have come in, but we received over 1,000 tips, and so it needed to be consistent with. So I didn't enter the charge information, so I don't know what's there. It would be. I couldn't comment to the date or what was written.
While you say you won't specify Eric Black's role, can you say with confidence that you believe you have in your custody the man who pulled the trigger on the gun that killed Jazmine Barnes?
Well, you're talking back to his role in it. I'll just say he admitted to being involved in this shooting incident.
And do you believe you have the person?
Yes.
In your custody?
Yes.
Who was responsible?
One of the individuals responsible. Yes.
For pulling the trigger on the gun?
I'm not going to talk about their roles. I'm sorry.
Sheriff, I know you addressed in Spanish briefly, on the issue of the reward, since it was not done through Crime Stoppers or your office, it was a lot of money. I'm sure that probably played a role in helping solve this crime. Do you have no role in administering who might get that reward?
We never administer rewards. That's something that, Mr. King,
and his people
announced, and so, that's through their process, and so, they handle that aspect of it. We don't handle Crime Stoppers either. Crime Stoppers handles their own whenever it comes through them.
And so no one is eligible for the Crime Stoppers reward, is that correct at this point?
At this point, no. We're still trying to generate new leads about now this aspect of the investigation, so we're encouraging folks to call our Crime Stoppers affiliate here at 713-222-TIPS, but that particular tip came through one of the many tips that were obtained through Mr. King.
Sir, is there surveillance video of the shooting?
We're still going through a lot of video. I don't know of any video that we do or don't have about the specific, but we're going through a lot of different video, and these new developments, we're looking at new aspects of it as well.
And did the suspect say why he was in the area at that time?
They reside out in the area.
So they live
They're out there. Everyone we've talked to so far is from the greater East Harris County.
One last question for Sheriff. There's a picture out there circulating right now of the second suspect with a name out there. Are you confident in telling the public that that's the guy? Is that the guy, the second suspect? Or should the public be helping you track someone down who's responsible for shooting this little girl?
We'll provide more information as we can. I mean, at this point, I just don't think it's prudent on my part to mention someone by name that we have not formally charged with a serious crime of capital murder. There's a lot of things I would like to say, but look, having been a former investigator myself and talking to our investigative team, I just don't feel that at this point today we can say that when we have a few loose ends to tighten up. But I have said that it's very likely that more charges will be forthcoming in this.
But can you say the person is off the street?
I can't say that.
You're not actively out there looking for like 3 more people that could have been driving the car.
Yeah, at this point, again, we feel comfortable where we're at the investigation. We're still asking for folks that could maybe give us more information on who or what this second person could be or have done in this shooting incident. I mean, I've got to parse words a little bit, simply because, again, I want to be respectful of the process and an individual that has not been formally charged. And that's difficult sometimes to do in a forum like this, but I simply cannot other than confirm, and it's a good thing that we have formally charged Eric Black Jr. As being involved in the shooting of Jazmine Barnes.
But do you still want him to come forward? Are you still looking to question that person?
I'm sorry?
The man in the red truck? Are you still?
Yes. We would still like to identify the person in the red truck that was driving that morning. We now believe they were most likely just going to be a witness to it, either by sight or sound, may have heard something because they were at that light and maybe something will jog their memory. And also feel compelled, I'll say it in English, but we also have a large, diverse immigrant community here in our region, and many times they're afraid to come forward for a number of reasons. And so we want to make sure that they can rest assured that they can contact us, they can call Crime Stoppers and remain anonymous and give us information if they were driving to work or from work. We want to know. A la comunidad inmigrante queremos que sepan que necesitamos su apoyo si saben o si ustedes estaban conduciendo esa troca roja que se ha visto mucho esta semana y tal vez iban manejando al trabajo, regresando al trabajo, por favor no teman y comuníquense con nosotros. And again, want to thank everybody for all the local media, national media as well that's been here reporting on this, to really keep this at the forefront, and just want to thank everyone so much. I want to thank Pastor Deckard as well, that was at the very beginning assisting the family and stuff. I know it's a large family. Our focus has been on trying to resolve the case, and frankly, within a week's time frame, considering where we kind of started, I think it's been phenomenal work on the part of our Harris County Sheriff's Office investigators and personnel. So just very thankful to all of them and to all the public for their support. We know many of them remain confident in our efforts to be able to bring this to a closure, and ironically, it's on the 1-week anniversary where we're able to make this significant announcement. And want to thank you all. I do want to provide an opportunity to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Thank you for being patient and standing up here. And she wanted to say a few words.
First of all, Sheriff, thank you so very much for having us in your home here. And thank you to your department, to all of the local law enforcement and federal authorities that have been engaged. Let me start by saying that I asked the family to recognize the outpouring of love and affection that has been given across the nation. I noticed pastors are here. I want to officially thank all of the pastors that are here. I can't call each of them by name, but I saw pastors, and I want to thank them for surrounding the family. A young mother lost her daughter. A young father who is here in the room lost his daughter. This was a tragic and enormous event that impacted their family and their extended family. I think it is important to take note that this community suspected it was someone that did not look like them and that it might have been a hate crime. But throughout the entire week, they listened to the process of law and order, and they supported the sheriff and all of the law enforcement in their efforts. That should be the story going from this county and this city, that Jazmine's life was so important that no one tried to take the law in their own hands. The beauty of this precious child was too important and the amazing showing of 1,000+ individuals of varying backgrounds, races, color and creed, and religion was evidence of that respect and that love for her. Now, I am comforted by the fact that we're not finished with this investigation, that it is ongoing. And I certainly hope that people would accept the fear that that young mother experienced, having sat down at her bedside and listened to her story, and for you all to realize that in that car was a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an almost 8-year-old, which was Jazmine. Those were children experiencing probably the deepest fear that they had ever experienced. And they did the best they could to give to law enforcement as exact a rendering as they thought that they saw. I am glad there were many tips. And the one thing I think is important as relates to communities who live sometimes amongst violence and gun violence, as the sheriff has indicated, I think it is important to note that this community, and there will be many voices, will certainly not be any less intense on the perpetrator being brought to justice, irrespective of the race of that person. I do want to thank the Department of Justice that I engage with and ready to answer any calls to come from local government and their consideration if this went further for helping as a task force. I want to thank ATF. I want to thank the existence of a database that was and could have been made available to this local team for anyone who had any tendencies that they would need to review. And then I think it is important to, again, emphasize to the faith community that we must continue to pray and embrace this family as they funeralize Jazmine, that peace will not only be brought to them, but be brought to the community. No person of a different color was attacked. No person was confronted because of this pictorial picture of a possible perpetrator. That is an important statement to be made. We did not divide over the fact of what many thought this was. And I think we will come to closure when the sheriff and other law enforcement officials working with him and his detectives should be applauded, come to their final resolution as to what this is, and that the community comes together around a stop sign of stopping the violence, stopping the gun violence. So I am very grateful to the sheriff. We have committed to working together on potential federal efforts to help him in what he faces. Sheriff, I know there are pastors here. I just want to applaud them.
Yes.
I also want to acknowledge that I think they want to give information about where the funeral is. Pastor Dixon wanted to give information about where the funeral was, and Pastor Deckard. And I would yield to them to give information where the funeral is going to be. The other pastors that are here. So let me just simply say, I'll certainly take individual questions, but I wanted to say to the sheriff, I thank you for engaging.
We've been listening to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Before that, of course, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez giving us the news that 1 week after 7-year-old Jazmine Barnes was senselessly murdered, they do have a man in custody who is charged with capital murder in connection to her death.
At this point, I think the two big questions were the who and the why. At this point, the why, it appears likely just a case of mistaken identity. As far as the who, we do know one person has been formally charged with capital murder. That is Eric Black Jr., although the sheriff said this is an ongoing investigation. More suspects may be named, may be formally charged, but right now we are still waiting for this case to evolve. We do know that the funeral for little Jazmine will be held on Tuesday. That's going to be over at the Greenhouse International Church. We're told the viewing will take place at 10 o'clock o'clock in the morning. The funeral itself, the service, will be held at noon, and obviously a balloon release will take place right thereafter. And we do expect a large turnout, as we've seen an outpouring of support for this family throughout this entire ordeal.
Coverage of the story will continue this week. You can continue to follow this breaking story on our website, click2houston.com. We will be back with our 5 o'clock news on click2houston.com due to today's football game. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining us.
This has been a breaking news alert from KPRC Channel 2. For continuing coverage, log on to click2houston.com.
Of noon at Community of Faith, 1024 Pine Month, under the leadership of Bishop James Dixon. And also, I'm glad and proud to be standing here today with Bishop Ursher, who will also be officiating the funeral. He's the pastor of Chris, the father. So I'm going to take a stand back, and Bishop Dixon will come now and give further instructions and directions for the funeral service on this Tuesday, 10 a.m. viewing, 12 noon, the funeral. Let's now hear from Bishop Dixon.
Thank you, Sheriff Gonzalez, and to our Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, both of whom have been working 24/7 in regards to this crisis, and certainly to Pastor Deckard as well, working tirelessly, and to Bishop L. Usher, Terrence as well, these pastors. We are blessed in this city to have the kind of collegial relationships between pastors and law enforcement and elected officials, where we all really work together, we cry together, we pray together, we serve together, and sacrifice together. And moments like these, we come together in order to mend and heal broken hearts. We thank God for that. Today, my grief is beyond measure. I'm a father. I have children, and I cannot imagine the grief of this father, this mother, and others, the loss of this 7-year-old child. We're here to simply say we're here to serve, and as Pastor Deckard indicated, we will host a service on Tuesday. But I want to implore our community, both locally and nationally, to have the conversation with all of our young people about the sanctity of life, and the value of human life. This is one person was not lost, many are lost, and we're hoping that the grief of this moment will be turned into power as we serve to make our neighborhoods and our communities safer for all children across this nation, make the world a safer place for every child. And that's what our message is, and we're hoping that we can convey that with the utmost of strength and sincerity. Bishop L. Usher has been working with his father and his family, and we would like to have him to have a brief word before things come to conclusion. But we're looking forward to serving this family with dignity and the grace that they are so well deserving of.
Thank you. Well, basically, on behalf of the family, and Chris, he wants to tell everyone thank you for your prayers, your support, and all the work that have been put forth thus far. We ask that you continue to pray for the family as they put Jazmine to rest. And so we're asking that you continue to pray because your prayers have worked. Thank you.
Amen. Congresswoman, one question for you. Do you feel it was irresponsible at all to suggest that this was a hate crime when we didn't have all the facts?
Absolutely not. Nothing is irresponsible when it comes to the loss of a precious 7 or 8-year-old. And as many in the community did, they expressed that it seems to have the criteria of that, which is why I emphasize that the intensity of the community is no less, because the perpetrator has been found to be something other than. But the idea of the question of race has been stated by Bishop Dixon and others that we should engage in that discussion, because it would be the kind of thing that lends itself to thinking if this description came in however way from a frightened car full of young girls, baby girls, and their frightened mother. And so the good thing was that in the comments that were made, there was no hysteria, there was no encouraging individuals to go out and find that person. It was nothing but orderly respect for the rule of law, allowing our law enforcement to be able to do their tasks, and then now to call for an understanding that any violence against a child should not be the norm, and that we should stand up against all violence. I believe this individual that is now one of the alleged perpetrators was born in 1998. That's a 20-year-old, barely. We should not want to suffer any kind of actions by children and young men or young women that would create this violent act and this tragic, horrific death. I'm engaged because my stomach and my heart were turned upside down. Wanted to bring comfort to a mother in her bed as I sat by her side, to listen to her pain and her description of the red truck. But it didn't cause me to go out and call for an immediate outpouring of rage of the community. It was simply to say, let law enforcement from the sheriff's office, the police department, constables, and yes, the Department of Justice, be as helpful as they could possibly be. I think we did that, and I think all good Houstonians will frankly welcome the engagement and the discussion that is so needed. And hopefully all good Houstonians and Harris Countyans will rally around law enforcement to find a way to stop senseless violence and senseless gun violence. That is the story we should take away, and as well the story that the community came together and showed no anger toward law enforcement and no anger toward anybody that was different from them. You should have seen the body of people who were from all walks of life and did not feel intimidated by anyone mentioning what it might be. That's a blessing. And so I started by saying I asked the community to pray for this family, this father, this mother, pray for this sheriff department. This happens to be the weekend of worship. People worship on different days. And so I'm asking them to pray for this family, this community, and it's wonderful to have a sheriff who's willing to engage in a dialogue about violence, about hate, about guns, and we have that along with the chief of our law enforcement, the mayor of our city, and certainly I want to acknowledge that the office of Commissioner Rodney Ellis is represented here. He represents the sheriff and the sheriff's department, and we are going to be working closely together between federal and county, state and city on new laws that are going to hopefully, new funding that's going to hopefully help in many of the issues that the sheriff has to face. So we thank you, and I was glad to be part of the effort. Thank you very much. Did I answer your question, sir? Thank you.
Could I ask one question, though? And I understand, as you said, there was no retaliation, there was no violence, but do you think this created an undercurrent of racial tension?
Absolutely not. I have not had any confrontations of anybody that was involved in the rally, none from the family members. I remember the words of the mother. She just said, find that person. She mentioned nothing about anything. All of us, we mentioned nothing about race. She said, find that person. I hope this is a door opener, frankly, for the fears and apprehension of mothers and fathers concerned about their children and guns. And I hope this is a door opener to the faith we have in law enforcement and the fact that they are, in fact, here to protect us.
Thank you, everyone.
Is this his phone?
Sure.